When we talk about composable, some of our clients are going, right, and should it be headless? And what is headless, right? And at what point is a CMS natively headless, and why is that important? Or can you use a CMS and make it headless? There's all these questions that are coming up, right? But it starts with, if we're going to be composable, do we need to look at it from a detached way? And that brings up...
Yeah, so let's start with headless. What is headless? Headless is front end and back end being on two separate servers, essentially. Like, just think of it like that. They're on two different computers running separately. And so when you've got that going on, that means you've got two different code bases and it's a whole load of fluff. So that's headless. You've got composable, which when it comes to what we've just talked about, we've talked about the best tool for the job, but when it's talked about in a headless context, that has a slightly different meaning, and what they're often talking about is maybe omni-channel, that sort of thing. And then there's also another kind of headless that you'll run into, which is sort of semi-headless, essentially, where you'll have some parts of a website that are served headlessly and other parts that are monolithic. Right. And that can be sort of in one jumble. So it's like you've got this whole hodgepodge of different meanings of headless in the sort of web design and development world. The honest truth is, it's that decoupled front end and back end, that separate front end and back end, that setup realistically doesn't work great for a lot of people, and that's the thing that gets talked about the most at the moment. It's not a bad idea, it's not inherently bad, it's just sort of, it's not quite it. And I think when talking about composable and headless, it doesn't need to come in. You don't necessarily need to decouple your front end and back end. Even if your company, your brand, your team would benefit from composable, that doesn't necessarily mean they'd benefit from front end being on a separate server to back end, because that specific setup has, you know, pluses and minuses depending on what you're trying to do. There are times where maybe you're trying to syndicate content to a number of places, you know?
Traditionally, in the last 5 years, when people have used the buzzword headless on the client side, and they come to us and said, somebody in our team said we need to make this headless. The conversation starts with, it'll be more performant, it'll be faster, it'll be better for our website. Have you found that to be true on your end?
Arguably it's easier to make it, but not inherently. It doesn't directly mean that you're going to have a performance site. You still need to put a lot of work into it. And so I would say that the real reasons where you would start to consider it, bearing in mind it's just one of many, you know, technologies, is one, where user experience is really important. Two, where you've got omni-channel in some way, content going somewhere, or going multiple places rather, or content coming from multiple places. And then otherwise, it's partly a team consideration as well, you know, what works for you. Okay,
so let's dig into those one at a time. When you said user experience was number one, what did you mean by that? Are you talking about the guest on the website, or are you talking about the team?
Well, I would say it's, we, like, personally, from Drewl side, we always say both, because we always try and consider both. But I would say, like, primarily, if you're deciding it for a brand and user experience is key for your brand, what I mean by that is where you can, like, see a direct impact on, you know, site user experience. And I don't mean performance there, I mean things like the way things load in, or, you know, no delays between navigating around the site, or, you know, almost like a native-like experience. You can build almost an application in your browser. And so there are situations where that's really valuable, and there are brands who have shown the benefit of those sort of more engaging experiences, and they are often very e-commerce or sort of online commerce focused. And I'd say that that's kind of where it is. It's a bit of an unintangible, hard to measure, but
you're not telling me why headless makes it better.
It doesn't necessarily make it better, though.
So I'm just gonna I'm gonna challenge you on this. Why should a crowd favorite client choose headless when they're working with crowd favorite and Drewl together?
Should we? I feel like the next 2 points will help on that bit, because I wouldn't go just for the user experience part. I don't think. I wouldn't. I don't think I would recommend someone going just for that reason. You know. I don't think I would recommend someone going for just any of these reasons. Actually, you know, it's got to be a bit of a lining of them.
So one of the main reasons that we decided to sit down in person and talk is because we both agree that with the history and work product of crowd favorite working with large enterprise brands and creating complex infrastructures around digital transformation and digital delivery, and Drewl's innovation around decoupled and headless and how you're bringing UX to the surface of that, there was an opportunity for us to look at working together. In doing that, I realized very quickly that most of the conversations that we've had with our clients are started by our clients saying, someone said that headless is more performant. And that's the one reason they come to us and say, let's take a look at that. And it's never been a very clean conversation that way. When I speak to you, I've heard you say that it's actually a combination of things that should make you choose headless. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, so I think the way that often clients approach you is like that, right? Like they say, we want to build X, but they don't necessarily tell you why. And I think with headless, the why is really important. And it's always important, but it's double important because you know, it's a potentially new technology for you. Yeah, so I would say there's kind of 3 main elements to it. We've got the user experience side of it, really just the user experience you're trying to create for end users. Then we've got the omni-channel experiences that are possible on headless, and that's essentially content going multiple places or content coming from multiple places. And then the final thing to consider with headless, I think, is team. Like, I think team is really important, and team, by that I mean the team you've got to support the site, the team you've got internally, and you know, if there's any alignment on the technology of it and the technologies your team currently use. I think that's another place where we've often seen a bit of a jumping off point where it makes sense.
So, number one, you mentioned the user experience. What changes when it's headless for the user experience? I'm going to ask about all 3, but what changes in headless on the user experience?
Cold hard facts, you can have a single page application that is native-like in the way it navigates between pages. So so that is about performance, but that's also about how the user perceives that. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
So can you give me an example of that? I'm going to keep it it simple for everybody who wants to understand it at the beginning level.
When I say native-like, I mean you click a page link and you're there instantly. Like you click it, by the time you released, you're on that page, kind of thing. And that is just the way headless works. It's a function of the technology, essentially. It's not inherent, but it's almost 100% of the time it will work like that.
So that's user experience. The second thing you mentioned was omnichannel. Now this is one that I know well because for years we've worked on projects where we had not one single source of truth, but we had to create a digital experience for end users that brought data from multiple sources. That makes sense. And as we've created this customer 360 experience or omni-channel experience where you're going out to customers, now you want to create experiences that aren't just on a web page. And that makes sense.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think that basically covers it. I think there's probably a bit more that we can get onto later about that, but yeah.
And then the third piece, the third final piece around why you should is the team. Now, what do you mean by the team experience? I'm assuming that you're going to say it's because it's a technical team.
Not just the technical team.
All right.
Not just the technical team. I think that the ability with Headless to make publishing experiences more significantly different than a monolithic setup, like in that you have complete flexibility, I suppose. But
how is that different for the team?
Well, it depends on the specific thing you decide to do. So I'll leave that there because that's too amorphous really to talk about. But I would say, you know, on the technical side and why I say team and technologies and what they're currently using inside a company, etc., is that oftentimes headless setups can use technologies that you might be using in your application as well. And so there might be some alignment. And we've seen that with quite a few companies as well.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Tayo from Drewl.
Hi, I'm Karim from Crowd Favorite.
And if you want to see more videos like this, head to the box below and click the link.